Welcome to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Come on to the theatre. Hi, diddly-dee, an actor's life for me.
Hello, and welcome to episode 18 of the Manx Theatre Podcast.
With me, Neil King.
And me, Neil Callin.
Thank you to everyone who's listened to our previous episodes. If you're new to the podcast, welcome along and thank you for joining us. You can still listen to all of our previous episodes through our accounts on Facebook and Instagram, as well as all the usual podcast outlets and manxradio.com/podcasts.
Coming up on this week's podcast, in Act 1, I visit Neil and the cast of Wind in the Willows at their rehearsals last Monday night and managed to grab a bit of a chat with each of the people as we were going along. Then in Act 2, we delve into the archive and find an interview I did in August 2019 with sound engineer and regular visitor to the Isle of Man, Alex Linney, whilst he was on the island for Singing in the Rain. But first, without any further ado, let's dim the house light and raise the curtain on Act 1 and my visit to the rehearsals of the Service Players production of The Wind in the Willows. It's Monday the 26th of October and I've taken a little punt up the stream from Podcast Towers to Toad Hall, or in this case, Elam Church Hall in Onchan. As tonight, I'm here to watch rehearsals for the Service Players production of The Wind in the Willows, which is at the Gaiety Theatre from the 5th to the 7th of November. I've brought my microphone with me, and whilst there is a lull in rehearsals, I'll see if I can manage to grab Toad and his friends for a quick chat.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre Podcast with Neil King and Neil Callin.
So I'm up at rehearsals here for Wind in the Willows. I'm joined by Dr. John Snelling. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Neil.
How are you doing, John?
I'm very well, thank you. Somewhat busy this week, I have to say. We're sort of living Wind in the Willows for the next couple of weeks, rehearsing pretty well every night, but we need it, so that's good.
Brilliant. So you're playing the part of Badger, is that correct?
I am Badger, yes.
So how's that going for you?
It's a great part, actually. I did this version of this play about 20 years ago and played Toad. And so I started out thinking I was going to miss him terribly. But I've become quite fond of Badger, I have to say. I think I've grown into him because he's a fairly sort of grandfatherly character. And there's a sort of hint of Winston Churchill about him as well. So I'm quite enjoying that sort of characterisation. He's also a bit grumpy, which also suits me quite well right now.
Marvellous. And he's probably not quite as energetic as Toad apart, I suppose.
No, although in fact he does head up the fight scene with the weasels in Act 2, and for some odd reason I've been cast as the sort of sword-wielding protagonist with my trusty cane. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Marvellous. Great. Well, best of luck.
Thank you very much.
I'm joined now by Chris Kane. So Chris, you're playing Mr. Toad.
I am indeed. There's a lot of green involved.
Yes, yeah, I've seen some of the pictures already with the moustache and the eyebrows and the hair and glasses, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting sort of pre-show makeup session for you, isn't it?
Well, it's less green than Shrek, that's all I can say really, but there's still, yes, there's quite a lot of green to get on before I go out there, but lovely character to play, of course. Toad, a famous literary character which was part of my childhood, and I dare say yours as well.
Oh yes, I mean, as a child there was a wonderful sort of animated TV series that was on, and yeah, a lot of my friends, we'll watch that every night after school. It was great.
So I remember the radio from my dad, which was a different one again. And then, of course, much more recently, there's been a musical which came out only 2 years ago, which was at the Palladium, which has a new book written for it, and that's brought the show back to people's attention again. And the version which we're doing, of course, was done at the National Theatre, and it was famously done. And they had such a response, they were asked if they could bring it back. I think it was a 20-year gap between shows because basically they had to build the theatre around the set.
Of course.
There was a lot of revolves and hydraulics, which we're not taking the Gaiety apart. I just want to assure everybody of that. But yeah, it's of course Alan Bennett's script, really witty, lots for the adults as well. It doesn't stray away from the story, but it just adds a little frisson or a bit of an edge and comedy to some of those scenes.
And it's a bit of a family affair this time for you as well, isn't it?
Well, it is. It was nearly going to be the full family, other than commitments of one senior member. Well, less senior, one. My wife.
Keep digging.
Yes, I'm already in the hole. I might as well keep digging. But yes, I've got both children as well, so that's a lovely opportunity to do that. And for one of them, it's his first time on the Gaiety stage, so that's going to be great fun.
So he's probably about the same age as you were with your stage debut, were you?
No, Josh is quite a bit older now because he's coming up to 15, but Jemima would be the same age as when I first stood on the Gaiety stage as Friedrich von Trapp in The Sound of Music back in, a long time ago. 1971.
My word. So
you were just a twinkle, I think.
Yeah, not even at that point. Yes, that's a few years before I was around, anyway. But yeah, obviously you're no stranger to the stage yourself. You've been in many things over the years.
Well, it's been a second home to me. I know that's a cliched statement, but it really has. I feel, we've been so amazingly lucky to have the great resource, which is the Gaiety Theatre, and indeed the Villa Marina, and the other arts facilities, which have proliferated around the island. And but the Gaiety is something special about it. And yes, I've been lucky to do, I think, at least 2 shows pretty much every year since then. So I'm going to keep going until I get it right.
So 2 shows a year since 1970.
Well, it's been more than a few years, and occasionally, but yeah.
Yeah, that adds up to quite a few shows then, doesn't it?
It does add up to quite a few shows, yes. You might ask, what am I doing still there?
Can you remember them all?
Yeah, I think if you've got the time, I probably could remember them all. I think starting with the musicals, I did a number of musicals with the Choral Union, which introduced me with and strangely actually, and very challenging for the choral back then, to do The Sound of Music and Oliver only 3 months apart. Two big children's shows. That's an awful lot of work to pull together.
There's a lot of rehearsals there for just 2 shows 3 months apart.
But then, fortunate to have a number of different plays and opportunities to do that. When I was at university, I came home and still managed to fit the shows in then. And then during that time, I set up my own theatre company, which was called Bedlam, which was specifically for the students when they were returning to the island, to give them something because they missed all the other show dates, But lovely thing to do, and an absolutely great show. Fantastic cast, a very big cast. So it's been a lot of a challenge to pull this size of cast together, and we haven't even tackled the technical side of things yet, but that'll be coming very, very shortly.
Yes, it's probably one of the biggest casts in a service player show for quite a few years, really, isn't it?
It is. We had a lot in Blackadder's Christmas Carol. Actually, that was quite a big cast because it covered lots of different scenes and changed around quite a bit. Dad's Army was another big cast, of course. The Lower Low was actually quite a big cast.
Oh, yeah, actually, yeah.
So, but it's nice to do something different as well. We occasionally get commented that, the service players, they're the ones who just do those things off the telly, aren't they? Well, and very much we aren't. The history of the service players, of course, goes back to John Pertwee being stationed on the island in the war. And the service players, the Legion players, both sat very comfortably next to each other, one predominantly doing murder mysteries, and the service players doing farce, of course. So I did a great many farces when I was a younger man. And it was really a conversation between Alex Brindley and myself, looking for something different to do for 100 years of the Great War, which brought Blackadder Goes Forth about, which was the first television adaptation we did. And at that time, not only had it not been done anywhere, but it wasn't available as a script, it wasn't necessarily available to perform. And it was a last night party from Noises Off, where Alex and I had this discussion, and we both said what would be great would be Blackadder Goes Forth. And I... probably emboldened by a few glasses of something, I said, leave it with me, I'll get in touch with them, whoever they are, but I'll get in touch with Ben Elton and Richard Curtis if I can, and see what they say. And they, when I finally got in touch with them, said, show us how you're going to do it, show us what you want to do. If you're happy to give money to our charity, then we'll let you go ahead and do it. So, and that started that, and I'm very glad to say that perhaps, I believe we brought a lot of people into the theatre for those television tributes that maybe wouldn't be ordinary theatre goers, and hopefully they're all very much enjoying it. But it's brought big houses for us, which has allowed us to fund doing all kinds of other theatre, not always at the Gaiety, but the other great performance spots around the island.
Brilliant. Well, I won't keep rehearsals for much longer, but it's only a couple of weeks to go. I wish you the best of luck with the rest of the rehearsals.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Simon Fletcher, welcome to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Thank you, Neil.
So this is, actually, welcome back, really, I should say, because we spoke to you, Neil spoke to you earlier in the year for Sound of Music, didn't he?
He did indeed, yes. Back in January, it was.
Yeah. So that was probably one of the few shows, actually, that managed to happen this year, just before lockdown came in.
That's right, yeah. We were very lucky to get to the show in just before lockdown. Very lucky. It's great that we've been able to reopen again on the island, and so we had one play on already, and a couple of other things at the Gaiety. So great that this can go ahead, and much luckier than the people across in the mainland.
So you're playing Ratty this time around?
I am, yes, yeah. It's it's a big challenge. I've never read Wind in the Willows. I was sort of vaguely familiar with it, but I'd never read it as a child or anything, so it's been a lot to take in a very short space of time, because I've sort of only been doing it for the last sort of 5-6 weeks really, since I finished last night at the prom, so it's all been a bit hectic.
bit of a change from the musicals where you've usually got about 4 or 5 months to get into the groove.
That's exactly it. You know, I've had chunks of dialogue in the past in shows, and it's not been too much of a problem. But learning it this quickly is proving a big problem for me. As you know, having seen some of it tonight.
Well, it seems to be going really, really well. I mean, you've got a few weeks. There's a few weeks left to go, and there's a bit of polishing to be done. Should we say?
A lot of polishing, yes, because we get into the theatre at the weekend. So it's coming down to the last sort of the last leg now. But you know, we'll get there.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Simon. I'm joined now by Gemma Varnon. Welcome to the Manx podcast.
Hello.
So, Gemma, you are playing the part of Mole.
I am, yes, for the second time, weirdly, because I was in the show about 19-20 years ago with the Legion players, and I've ended up in the same part.
Oh, so you played Mole last time as well?
I did, yeah.
So how's the two productions differing for you?
I'm trying not to compare them too much, because obviously every production's different. I can't really say one's sort of better than the other, but it's things are sort of coming back to me, but I'm trying to do things a bit differently this time.
Excellent. So this is one of the first things that you've done now with the Surface Plays, isn't it?
It is, yep. Done lots of acting with lots of different groups, and somehow never managed to be in a Surface Plays production before, so it's nice. They're a really nice, welcoming group. Having a very nice time.
Excellent. So you've got a couple of weeks to go now until the big show, and
yeah, it's getting down to it now. We're having those last few rehearsals before getting. So hoping to sort of see a show come together.
Brilliant. Well, best of luck for the show.
Thank you very much.
I'm joined now by Darren Webb. Good evening, Darren.
Good evening.
Welcome to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Why, thank you very much indeed.
This is the first time for you, isn't it?
It is. I'm popping my cherry, as it were.
Marvellous. So, in Wind of the Willows, then, you're playing the part of Albert the Horse, is that correct?
Albert the Horse, indeed, yes. He's a miserable chap, bless him. Very fun character to play. He's got a lot of character to him. But he's just, he just plods along his way through life, but always looking on the cup half empty rather than the cup half full. But he's a very fun character. He's very lovable.
And you're getting to wander away from your own accent as well, are you?
Yes, he's listed in the notes as being a Wolverhampton cousin of Eeyore. So I've got to go all sorts of right into the Midlands and talking about going out and all that type of thing.
Marvellous.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of how's the best word to say it? It's a bit of abuse for you, is there?
Yes, he's a horse, and horses get patted quite frequently in places that they don't really enjoy. Yes, I get my bum smacked many times. Normally by Chris Kane, which not a pleasant experience, really.
And you enjoy it, really, don't you?
I love it. No, it's good fun. He'll get some giggles from the audience, I'm sure it will. So. Yeah, it's good fun. Really good fun.
Marvellous. Well, wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much indeed. Hope to see you there.
Well, I've managed to drag Toby Smith away from rehearsals now. Toby, welcome to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Many thanks, Neil.
So you're playing Chief Weasel.
Yes, I mean he is the leader of the bad guys, if you can put it like that. So there's four of us in my evil gang.
Who's in your gang?
I've got another Weasel. I've got Norman Weasel with me, played by Bob Witcher. And I've got Cyril Stote, played by somebody who I'm not sure is a bit of a newcomer to the scene. He's a guy called Neil King. I'm not sure if you've heard of him before.
I'm vaguely aware of him, yes.
And then we have Frida Ferret, played by Sharon Walker.
Ah, so there's a fair bit of experience there amongst you, your Weasel gang.
Absolutely, there's a lot of evil potential there to be tapped into, yeah.
So, and I also noticed that you're sporting a rather fetching Weasel tash.
No, it's absolutely hideous. Yes, it's going to be some kind of little pencil-y type thing. But yeah, I can't sport as much ginger as you, unfortunately.
That comes from my Viking heritage, you see. So.
Oh, I see. Is that where?
So, you're doing quite a few plays now with the Surface Plays, haven't you?
I've done a few over the last few years. Yeah, get into one, and then before you know it, you're doing every one.
Well, it's very easy to do that nowadays over here, isn't it? I mean, even now that even this year with lockdown as well, where things sort of stopped for a while, but now that we're back open again, everything seems to be sort of motoring on, and there's lots coming out the woodwork.
Yeah, it's definitely picking up. I mean, we're even we're in the middle of this, but we're also in negotiations with somebody else about doing another play next year, and already thinking about one act and how many one acts we might be able to put together. So, yeah, it's exciting times, and it's definitely picked up again.
Brilliant. Well, a couple of weeks to go.
10 days or less.
Marvellous. Well, all the best, and we're looking forward to come and see it.
Yes, and I believe you're coming to the matinee, so no barracking, please.
I can't guarantee.
Oh.
That's the barracking, not the attendance.
Oh, I see.
Toby, thank you very much. All the best.
Cheers, Neil.
I'm joined now by director Robin Higgins. Robin, welcome to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Welcome, thank you.
So, Wind in the Willows then, the 5th to the 7th of November at the Gaiety Theatre. How's it going for you so far?
The usual bits of pulling your hair out and cursing behind, at the wall. But no, it's coming on great, actually. There's always loose ends and things to tie up. But actually, some of the characterisation and some of the development and some of the guys are really, really bringing it together, though, at the moment, even though they might be having internal panic attacks.
So this is the Alan Bennett version of the original sort of Kenneth Williams classic.
Kenneth Graham.
Kenneth Graham, sorry.
That would be a different classic.
So how does this differ then from the original?
Well, actually, in terms of the story, I mean, it sort of sticks fairly true to the story. I mean, you sort of have the omittance of the sort of bit, the chapter with Pan, which lots of versions made. But essentially, it's very true to the story. It's just, of course, it's Alan Bennett's style. So. Think tweeds and country attire, and of course that dry wit and humour which Alan Bennett is so well known for.
Brilliant. And we've got all the usual hitters in there. There's the caravan and the motor car and the train.
There's a caravan, motor car, we have a train, we have a barge. Crikey, I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, there's plenty of things to build and plenty of things to sort of move around and whatnot.
So this is your first time directing at the Gaiety, yeah?
This is my first time at the Gaiety, yeah. So it's certainly not a small one to start with. Quite often we do sort of straight plays and things in the service players. All sorts of different styles. But yeah, so it's not a musical, but there are songs in it. Which has been nice because my background is sort of musical performance is what I've got my degree in and things. Yeah, it's been nice to bring some of the musical style to it whilst not being a musical, I suppose.
Brilliant. So then it's quite a large cast, isn't it? What's been the biggest challenge for you so far?
I suppose, the logistics of it are difficult, and of course it's just keeping everyone happy in what they're doing and that they feel that they've had enough time to rehearse the various parts. Yeah, inevitably there's some bits now which we've rehearsed a lot of times which have come together really nicely, and there's other bits that we need to sort of keep going over, and I think a lot of it's just nerves. There's a huge amount of words to be learned for some of the characters. I'm not sort of panicking about anything in particular. It's a lot of it will be getting it together in the theatre, bringing the lights in, bringing the sound in, bringing the actual movement, like you say, the caravan, the working parts, and hoping the cast can cope.
Yeah, set and scenery often make things a little bit more interesting, don't they?
They do, yeah, and it's certainly when it's moving and things. So we've tried to sort of think about ways in which we can try to perhaps minimise some of the more extreme movements that would be there. The caravan certainly posed a bit of an issue because, of course, it has to be pulled by Darren, who is our Albert, and that's with 3 people on. So that's Chris, Gemma, and Simon. So. Yes, but we've worked that one out now, I think.
Marvellous. And there's a wealth of talent there amongst your lead cast, with Chris and with Gemma and with Simon. I'm sure they're going to be fantastic.
Yeah, we've been really lucky. Because it's such a large cast, it's been really nice to actually sort of invite people and ask people to come and join us. And especially people that haven't done anything with us for a long time, and new people. New people is always good, and we're always after new people in. And we've really lucked out, I think, in the cast. I'm really happy with what we've got.
Brilliant. So the show then is the 5th to the 7th of November. There's 4 shows in all, so it's Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday afternoon, and Saturday night. So tickets obviously are on sale now, and we're just over about a week and a half away, and that's it. You're off.
Yes, we're in the theatre on the first floor getting, so that's the big set build day, and then we've got lights and technical stuff to get done, and dress rehearsal Wednesday, and then that's it. Bonfire night is our opening night.
And away you go.
And away we go with a bang.
Brilliant. Well, we wish you all the best, and we'll hopefully get to speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre Podcast with Neil King and Neil Callin.
Well, that was my chat with the cast of the Service Players production of The Wind to the Willows, which runs at the Gaiety Theatre from this Thursday, the 5th of November, through to Saturday the 7th. And there are 2 performances on the Saturday, with an afternoon and an evening show. And tickets are available from all the usual outlets. If you're interested in local musicians and artists, check out our sister podcast, Supergroup, where Neil King talks to Manx songwriters and musicians as they set up their fantasy supergroup.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Now it's time for Act 2, and our archive chat with sound engineer and regular contributor to the Gaiety Theatre, Alex Linney. Right, so on this episode of the Manx Theatre Podcast, we're going to look at the people that are involved in the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you wouldn't necessarily normally see in your everyday visit to the theatre. So joining us today is Alex Linney of Linney PA Systems Limited, who looks after the sound on the majority of musicals at the Gaiety. Welcome, Alex.
Hello, Neil.
So, Alex, then, you live in Dalton-in-Furness.
That's right, it's South Cumbria, near Barrow-in-Furness.
And you travel over for each of the shows that you do?
That's right, yeah. I would normally come over on the boat on the Ben Macree. Now, it's actually not that far as the crow flies. It's about, I think, 35 miles or something like that. And from just up the road from our house, we can see across to the Isle of Man. Unfortunately, it takes me about 5 hours to get here normally.
So you're not an island resident then, but probably the amount of time you're spending here, certainly in recent years, it probably feels like you are.
I typically, on average, would come here 5 or 6 times a year. Last year I was here more because I was covering for one of the in-house technical staff at the Gaiety who was off long-term sick, so I spent probably maybe 5 months or something last year here. Wow. But no, I come normally. It's about 5 or 6 of the bigger shows, typically musicals, that I come to the Gaiety for.
Yeah, so initially it was probably just the one society that you came over for.
I originally started in 2002, and that was to do a one-off, which was to show Evita, which was a co-production between a UK company and the Manx Operatic Society.
Right, yes, that was Anthony Williams, wasn't it?
That's correct, yes. So AWP. And I got involved because they were looking for a sound operator, basically, to do this show in the summertime. And somebody who I worked with at Butlins holiday camp recommended me to them. So I came over to do the show there, and then following on from that, I started coming once a year to do productions for the Manx Operatic Society. But then I did that for probably about 5 years, and then in 2007, Taylorian Productions started doing the summer season at the Gaiety. So I started doing that, and then kind of things built up from there, really, and I started coming more regularly to the island.
You get pulled into the DCU? And...
Well, that's right, and some of the shows I got asked for because the technical requirements were getting more complex. So with the DCU, for instance, they were doing a production of Les Miserables in 2009, and they said they needed to use 38 radio microphones, which are the microphones the actors would wear on their head, basically. So that's quite a large number, or it definitely was at the time. So the person they had doing that said, we can't do that, that's impossible. So I said, well, I can do that, and that's how I ended up getting involved with them. Yeah,
because I think when I first started with the Manx Operatic in '99 for Hot Mercado, there was probably 4, maybe 5 head mics altogether.
Well, that's
and that was
right.
It.
In the last 20 years, the sound side of theatre has definitely become a lot more complex in general. Really, some of it is because of people's expectations. I think also there's more modern musicals now out there which have a different style as well. And some of those, it is more of an amplified sound and not a traditional one, really. So there's a bit of a mixture but the requirements have got a lot more complicated.
So having worked then on many get-ins and get-outs with many shows over the years, I think it's probably fair to say that you're usually the first man in and the last man out.
Quite often, the lighting crew also have a lot of equipment usually. But most of the shows I do at the Gaiety, I supply all the equipment as well, or 90% of it. I typically would use all my own speakers and amplifiers and my own mixing desk and microphones, so there's a lot of equipment set up. And then you'll have the orchestra pit and microphones for the instruments and things like that. And sometimes I'll have things like surround sound speakers positioned around the theatre.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of equipment.
So what's your kind of process then? Is there a certain amount of things that you need to get done before the main bulk of the sort of lighting and set goes in, and then the rest happens sort of afterwards as it's ongoing?
If I was setting up a show at the Gaiety, typically I would be doing the stuff in the auditorium, setting up the speakers and the mixing desk and things like that, whilst the set and the lighting was going in, so I'm not getting in the way of what's happening on the stage. And then I would move to that sort of area later on, really. It's quite good when I come to do shows regularly at the Gaiety, because I have a sort of a standard setup, so I can pretty much revert to that each time and start with a bass. If I was going to some other venue, it might be a longer process because I was having to start from scratch. So I do have like a sort of bass setup that I go back to typically.
I suppose knowing the theatre like you do, it probably has its benefits in that aspect, that you know what to expect when you go in. And...
Well, it's a lovely venue. It has its peculiarities as well. I mean, I'm sure when it was built, the amplified sound didn't exist.
Oh, no.
It's the same in a lot of venues. The Gaieties, now they have some in-house sound equipment there already, but unfortunately the mixing desk they have is upstairs, which in what you would call either the gallery or the gods.
Yeah.
But in the Gaiety, they've got like a domed ceiling. So upstairs in the gods, the sound, the acoustics are a lot different to down in the stalls and the circle, because down in the stalls, which is the lower part of the theatre, there's lots of carpets and plush seating, so the sound, it's very dead there, and you would need quite like artificial reverberation to make the sound more live. But when you're up in the gods, everything's bouncing around with the ceiling.
Yes.
So it's a lot more lively. But unfortunately, if you're trying to mix the sound from up there, then it doesn't really translate very well down into the lower part of the theatre. So typically I use my own mixing desk and would sit down in the stalls myself, and I've generally done that for the last few years. Occasionally I might come and do a smaller show and use the in-house equipment, because it obviously if it was something for like 1 or 2 nights, it wouldn't be practical to set all the equipment up, but I prefer doing it that way, definitely.
So then once you're set up then, and it comes to sort of opening night, is that you sort of done, or as the show goes, are you constantly sort of tweaking and working?
You definitely have to adapt. I mean, there's lots of factors that are changing. The size of the audience, the sort of the reaction of the audience makes a big difference. I mean, I'm doing this Singing in the Rain at the moment for the Taylorian, and yesterday I felt that the audience was more subdued than other shows, and you've definitely got to change the overall levels to adapt for that. You also get it where different actors may sound different on and you have to adjust their settings. Maybe they've got, even if they've got like something like a cold coming on, or
someone's feeling a bit tired today,
something like that. You've got to, or even the positioning of the microphones on their heads. If that changes even by a couple of centimetres, then that makes a huge difference. So you have to compensate. And also, we've had on this show as well where they've had different players in the orchestra. So someone's done the first week, but then say the flute players changed for the second week, and then they play different. So you suddenly think, oh well, that suddenly sounds twice as loud on that bit. So you've got to be, you have to become constantly adapting.
Yeah, and I suppose with the sound then, very much like lighting in a certain way, so you can have quite a control over the show. I mean, a friend of ours, Sarah Holland, she likes to sort of say, when she's working the corner, depending on how long she holds the blackout and things like that, can almost control the how long the audience applauds for at the end of a number.
Yes, well, you could do that with sound things as well. Sometimes I have cues like that where you're going to start something else, and like Sarah says about holding the applause, you can do that. I mean, not always on a musical, but sometimes with shows where I'm playing backing tracks and things like that, you can
sound effects and things.
Yes, that's right.
So it's not just the Gaiety then that you've worked in over here. You've done shows at the Villa Marina as well, haven't you?
Yes, obviously it's a different style of venue, the Villa, but I don't just do theatre productions. I also do sound for live music and bands, and I think I enjoy the variety of doing different styles of events. I think if you just keep doing theatre shows and musicals all the time, it's a bad thing anyway.
Get stuck in a rut.
Yeah, well, some of my interest isn't just actually like mixing the shows. I'm interested in the technical side as well. So it's like fault finding and making something work. Really, I'm quite good. Really, if someone tells me that something needs to happen, then I will go and learn how to do that. That's one of my strong points. I would say.
If you don't know how to do it, you'll soon find out how.
Yeah. Well, if I have to go and learn how to do something on my own, then I can usually come up with something like that. But no, I've helped do. I've done sound for people like Alfie Bow at the Villa and things like that. He came on. He did like a sort of a warm up tour.
Yeah.
And normally a lot of the bigger acts at the Villa would bring their own sound engineers with them, and you would be just typically helping them set up, and then they would mix a show. But no, I did an Alfie Bow show there, and he just came on his own with the band, and it was quite low key, and then I mixed that, and it was quite good. I've done a few things like that, and sometimes they also have more theatre related shows over there and charity concerts and things like that. So I do like the variety.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre Podcast with Neil King and Neil Callin.
What's your preferred type of show then, or type of concert to do?
I don't think I have any one in particular. I think I've gravitated to theatre a bit more for the technical complexity of it, because mixing live bands, say a rock band, I wouldn't. In some ways, it's simpler. It's easier for someone to just go and mix a band than a musical, I think, because you can go and sort of listen to a lot of like musicians, say in like a pub band or something like that. You could mix the drums and the guitars and the vocals, and then it would stay fairly static, the balance throughout the evening. You might turn up there might be a guitar solo or something like that, but that's more like you're not sort of turning different mics on and off all the time and things like that. The theatre requires a much greater degree of concentration. I think. Well, I mean, I've had some disasters in the past before where, because really you're in total control of the microphone, so basically when somebody is off stage, their microphone shouldn't be on. You
don't want to be hearing what's going on in the wings.
No, well, I remember doing a show once, and it was The King and I, and this was when I was still doing the sound upstairs in the Gods at the Gaiety, so you can't really see what happens very well. But it got to a point in the show, and there's a section in The King and I where it's a ballet section, I think, and but they had a narrator in it. So the narrator's microphone, if I'm following the script correctly, I would turn that microphone on at the start of the scene, and she's meant to go, "Your Majesty." That was the first. But I turned this mic up, and then there was several expletives from the dressing rooms because
he wasn't on stage.
They forgot. I'm not sure. I can't remember if it was that they'd forgotten about it, or they were late doing a scene change. So it's sometimes good to look at the stage before you
put the mic up. And I guess obviously the more mics you have in a show, the more possibilities for accidents like that to happen.
Well, that's right. No, it is difficult, and you basically, the technique you would do when you're mixing a show is do what's called line by line mixing. So say you've got 8 people on stage in a scene, you typically wouldn't leave all the microphones on at the same time, because so if somebody's talking, you would probably have all the mics on at a low level, and then fade each one up as each person says the line. And now, obviously, as the number of microphones has risen, then you've only got a certain number of fingers. so if you're doing a show with say 30 microphones, then it's impractical for you to have all 30 microphones laid out in a row and try and mix that manually. So you typically would use a certain amount of automation on the mixing desk to group things together to help you achieve that, really.
Yeah.
So
otherwise, you'd need another couple of arms and an extra few fingers.
So say, for instance, it's common now in a musical to use the people's radio microphones for when they're doing chorus singing, which didn't always used to be done in the past. It was only the principal cast who would, but now they're wanting to sort of do that. So I would typically, if they've got a chorus number, I would have all the male chorus grouped to one fader, and then all the female chorus grouped to another fader, so I can push them up just with 2 fingers, and then all the principal cast have but then that would change in another scene of the show. So I would have memories in the mixing desk which alter the routing during the show to what comes up on different faders.
So different songs then have different groupings.
Different groupings and things like that.
Right, so Tech Week then is obviously very, very busy for you, but then once the show opens then, with the exception of maybe a little bit of minor maintenance on microphones and things as it goes along, I guess a lot of the time then is free to yourself. So what do you do to keep yourself...
I do like to get out and about in the Isle of Man. I mean, it's a lovely place to visit. It would be a shame to stay sat in all day. Typically, I would go and, like you say, do some maintenance in the morning. So, for instance, today I've been to the Gaiety. I would usually go there from about 10 in the morning till lunchtime and do things like check radio mics and change batteries and fix anything that's broken. But in the afternoon, I might get out. I like cycling. Sometimes there's a bike I can borrow here and go places like that. I like going up hills, walking up places like Snaefell and various...
You're a bit of a radio ham as well, aren't you?
Yes, well, that's why I partly like going up the hills as well, talking to people on that. I do that every once in a while. Sometimes you have to bring equipment with you, but obviously Snaefell is I think I'm trying to think out exactly how high it is, but I know it's over 2,000 feet, and I've talked to people in the south of England from up there, and with a small radio and things like that.
That's impressive range, isn't it?
Yes, so no, that's a good thing to do, really.
Excellent. Right then, so over the years, then obviously you've seen many shows at the Gaiety and elsewhere around the north of England where you normally work. But what's been your favourite show to work on?
I think it's difficult. That I liked doing things like Phantom of the Opera here. Some of it there's a bit of difference between, I think, what your favourite was in terms of technical complexity and sense of achievement, and whether you like the musical itself. I think there's a bit of both ways with that. I liked doing a Ghost the musical, but this was when I did it in York a few years ago, and I liked that from a technical point of view because it required the sound, lighting and AV departments working in harmony together to create special effects, and I was very proud of what we achieved with that in general. But I say some other shows I enjoy for the music and the style of it, really. I do like the variety. This is partly why I do this sort of musical, really, more like smaller scale and amateur kind of things, because I'm not so sure I would like doing one musical for years at a time.
8 shows a week for 2 years,
no, that doesn't really appeal for me. I think like a couple of weeks run or 1 or 2 weeks run and then move on to something different.
Especially if it's a show that you're not overly keen on as well, I suppose. Because when you see a show that many times, I think if it's a show that you like, it must be great, but if it's a show that's not particularly one of your favourites, then...
That's right. Well, I think you can like most things. I think if you've got to have an appreciation of musical theatre, and I think you can appreciate most things. Sometimes things you don't like, but usually for me, if there's something I'm not enjoying, it may be for another reason. Really, I also like it when sometimes it's difficult with things like if the orchestra is really loud because you're trying to fight against that and things like that. So there's other reasons why you enjoy things.
Yeah, there's always challenges there to get that level just right, I suppose. So then, are there any shows that you'd like to do? And shows that you'd like to say, right, I'd love to get my hands on that one and do something with it?
I'm trying to think. A lot of the stuff that's available to do, I've probably done in the kind of like amateur field. I mean, a lot of apart from newer musicals, I've probably done most things really. Again, a lot of these. I know there's a lot of musicals. There's like this Hamilton, which is, and that's like in a sort of hip hop. That with I would quite like. I mean, it's quite things like that are quite interesting to do because they're mixing the styles. Now, I don't know what that would be like to do, because a lot of the time the appeal to it is really sort of you've got to make theatre shows sound exciting, but it's a balance between having the dynamic range to it as well, because you don't want people to go away with bleeding ears. And I think something like that would be that sort of thing where you've got to kind of get that right, really. So, but no, I've done a lot of different shows, I would say. Most of coming to the Isle of Man, they've been very lucky because they've done certain shows that aren't available to amateur groups in the UK. Like, say, again, with things like Les Miserables with an adult cast, that's not allowed to be done. Yes, because in the UK,
it's
has
a youth
to be
production,
a youth production. So, and I've done that twice here. So the Isle of Man has a lot of some certain privileges.
Yes, that bit of water, although very expensive, it does do us a lot of favours sometimes.
Yes.
Right then, so the final question then. Has there ever been anything that's ever tempted you on stage?
The only... I don't think my musical career probably is about to start. I did... When I was a teenager, I was in Bugsy Malone as the character Fizzy in that. And I was doing the sound at the same time, which was interesting, but obviously not in the audience at the side of the stage. But then I kind of retired from musical theatre after that. I did used to be a reasonable singer, but not so much these days, I would say.
So what you're saying is that maybe we could tempt you back on stage at some point?
Well, I wouldn't completely rule it out.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Well, Alex Linney, thank you very much for your time. Glad that you came to join us on the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Manx Theatre Podcast.
Thanks again to Alex Linney for sparing the time to chat with us back in August 2019. So that brings episode 18 to a close.
Remember to like and follow our Facebook and Instagram pages to get notifications of upcoming events and episodes.
If you have any events that you'd like us to talk about or promote in a future episode, you can contact us through our social media accounts or by email to manxtheatrepodcast@gmail.com.
All that remains is for us to say thank you for listening, and we hope you join us again next time on the Manx Theatre Podcast.
I've been Neil Callin.
And I've been Neil King.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
The Manx Theatre Podcast, taking a look behind the scenes of Manx Theatre.
And happier than actors alive for me.